Okay, let's jump straight into it then and see how we get on. Let me just close out the poll and we'll share those results in a second. But first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Grant. I'm the lead wellbeing coach here at Wellbeing People, where we have a wonderful vision to empower as many people as possible to live their very best lives, to live your very best life. As always, we're going to encourage you to be as interactive as possible, be as introspective as you can, but be as interactive as you possibly can. Utilize that chat function now as much as you can to answer some of the questions, very reflective questions that we have for you today, and create that little wonderful kind of community in that chat function where we can look at best practice, look at other people's reflections and ideas, and perhaps we might notice something that actually really resonates with us that we can practice as well or engage with. If you want your answers only to be seen by me, then just ensure that that drop-down tab just reads to host and panelists, and then it'll only be seen by myself and the other host here at Wellbeing People today. Outside of that, if you do have any specific questions, please utilize that Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen and we'll jump into that. Let me tick those off, which is great. And then we'll jump into the session today. But brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending. And as I said earlier on, thank you for prioritizing some of your very valuable time today. And we're going to encourage you always to challenge what doesn't seem right to you, ask questions. And it's worth remembering, isn't it, that your best life and my best life will always be slightly different. So always be on the lookout for that one thing that perhaps resonates with you that you might go, you know what, I'll give that a practice today and see how we get on. I have got a slide deck that we're going to jump in and out of. Today's session is aiming to finish in about 45 minutes time. So we have that little kind of turnaround time if you've got to go over to another meeting where you can employ some kind of movement medicine or some meditations to again create the best environment for you today. So we're going to aim to finish in about 45 minutes time. This session is being recorded and we'll get cracking to see how we get on. So give me a quick high five if you're all ready to rock and roll. Nice one. Fabulous. Well done, everybody. Okay, let's jump into it. Oh, first of all, let me share with you the poll questions. There we go. Now, hopefully you can see this on your screen. Can you guys see this on your screen? Nice one. There we go. So people generally here looking at this topic as something of interest to them. So that's wonderful. So it's great that you're curious about your habits. It's great that you're curious about some of these lifestyle behaviors that you're employing currently, and perhaps utilizing today's session to really give yourself permission to pause today and to reflect around some of these useful and winning habits, and perhaps some of these degenerative habits that you might be employing at this time. Many people staying and joining here on full focus, which is awesome. Resisting the urge to multitask. I will encourage everybody every time to be as present as you possibly can. As Confucius said, if you chase two rabbits, you catch neither of them. So I would encourage you to pause, grab a pen and paper right now, because it would be very useful if you can write down some of the things that we're going to be reflecting around today and see how we go. But let's jump into the session and get through. Let's go. Okay. Let me pull that chat down. Wonderful. Okay. Good stuff. So are you living your life by design, or are you living your life by default? Now, often in our lives, I guess, we repeatedly do the same things over and over and over again, even without noticing it for the most part. And if you closely kind of look at these kind of actions, these patterns of behavior that we utilize, we'll probably realize, won't we, that they've resulted in the life that we have right now. And that probably means, of course, that the habits that we're employing and perhaps some of the things that we're doing right now might mean that we're also not living the life that we desire as well. So Aristotle put it in a wonderful way. He said that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, he said, then is not an act, but a habit. So by changing your habits, by reflecting around your habits and choosing to take a little bit more control of your life, we start to live our best life. So what is a habit? The author of Atomic Habits, James Clear, said it's a routine or a practice that's performed regularly in automatic response to specific situations. And it's important because, almost half of our day is spent on autopilot thanks to our habits. Habits help reduce our mental load on our brains, and it helps reduce us having to think every time we behave, every time we act. So today is a wonderful opportunity, as I keep saying, and will keep saying throughout this session. It's an amazing opportunity to reflect around your own lifestyle habits. And as we've said already, your life, your best life and my best life will always be different. So your life, as they say, it's essentially the sum of your habits. You are your habits. Now, whether you disagree or agree with that statement, I guess there's one thing that's very, very clear when it comes to habits. It's that habits influence our well-being. So today is about understanding a little bit more what our habits mean to us and how we can understand how they work as well. And I love this quote, by Gretchen Rubin here, what you do every day matters more than what you do once in a while. It's not about these once in a lifetime transformations. It's about these small, arguably, sometimes we perceive them as insignificant things that we do, but over time they create this wonderful, wonderful progression and help us accomplish our goals. So it's not necessarily these once in a lifetime transformations doing the toughest, bravest thing that we think that we need to do to create that best life. It's about perhaps small, incremental, sequential kind of changes that we can employ. And we'll talk about that as we bounce through the session today. Where's my clicker? There it is. So also today, we're going to encourage you to consider, are your current habits building the future life that you want? Give me a yes or no in a chat, or an unsure. Do you feel that your current habits are building the best future life that you want? Perhaps some of them, yeah. Perfect. There you go, Genevieve. So just reflecting, perhaps partly yes, partly no, not sure. And it's great, isn't it? Because self-awareness is critical. It's the first step to any change that we're after. So raising awareness and investing and prioritizing time today, just to pause, as we said, put away those distractions as best you can, and notice, raise our awareness around some of these things. Are our current habits hindering us, or are they helping us build the future life that we want? So let me, again, spin this to you. Is there a specific habit that you would like to make or break, or perhaps even upgrade? And we'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. Now, if there is, and if you want to, please feel free to share your habit around what it is, that you want to break. Is it a habit that you want to change? Is it one that you want to break? Or is it a habit that you want to make and you want to start a new behavior? Feel free to describe what habit you want to make and what habit you want to break. Feel free to share some examples in that chat function. Love that straight away. Someone's just popped in. Less sweets and more water. Go raise your hand if that resonates with a few of you. Make time for me rather than everyone else. Lovely. Quit smoking. Begin working out, stretching every day as well, some people saying. Read more. A little bit more movement. Less Maltesers. And now I wonder, was that someone, because that bounced through, was that someone from Wellbeing People who knows that I have a little kind of weakness, Achilles heel in Malteser? I could sniff out Malteser from 400 yards away. Start exercising again, less snacking. Wonderful reflections, brilliant. How to use my time more effectively. And do you know what? It's really important for me to share with you all that I'm certainly not here to tell you how to live your life. Well-being is not being told how to live your life. Well-being is taking ownership. It's being aware of our current behaviors and perhaps some of the things that we want to change. and then how we can go about it. So it's taking ownership of your well-being. So I'm not here to tell you how to set your goals or what goals they should be. It's important that we pause and reflect around them ourselves. So again, a wonderful reflective question. I'm going to encourage you just for a moment, just to reflect around this. Hopefully you've all written down your specific habit that you'd like to make or break, or certainly it's resonating and it's conscious in your brain at the moment. But here's a wonderful question that's really important for us to really sustain a level of adherence, is to understand perhaps some of our obstacles and barriers. Someone's written straight away, you know, in there, as you can see, that it's myself. Perhaps it's myself that's the biggest obstacle in sustaining your desired habit. And what can you think of, Debbie, there? What can you think of specifically? What is it about you then that you think is as an obstacle to your desired habits? And again, feel free to reflect and share this much or this much. It's entirely up to you how much you share today. There's no judgment here. Negative thinking, so mindset is jumping into play here. Time management. Again, lovely reflections. Procrastination, big one, right? A fear of reality, interesting. Thank you for sharing, everybody. Again, it's really, really important that we do take this time to reflect around these things. Wonderful. A lack of motivation. We'll talk about that today. Boredom as well. What do we do in those situations? Wonderful reflections. Again, thank you so much. Okay, so let's jump into it a little bit more then. I'd like to begin just by introducing you to what's known as the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule. Some of you may be aware of this, and it states that actually for many outcomes that we have, roughly 80% of the consequences come from 20% of the causes. In other words, a small percentage of the causes or the things that we do have an outsized effect, have a large effect on the outcome. So, for example, some examples are 80% of your success comes from 20% of your ideas. 80% of your stress are caused by 20% of your stresses. 80% of your sleep quality occurs in 20% of your sleep. And that's why it's imperative that we get access to those deeper stages of sleep, right? And we talk about this quite a lot in our Recalibrate Wellbeing 12-week programs, certainly on the week that focuses on sleep quality. 80%, interestingly, 80% of people marry within 20% of the local population. And again, these you know, it's an important concept to understand, because it can really help us identify which habits to prioritize, which ones are more important or most important to us. And if we prioritize those, we then know which ones can make the biggest impact in our well-being. It's also worth, you know, really noting that there is a very common misconception with the Pareto principle here, that with 20% of effort, you can achieve 80% of the results. Perhaps you've heard that. Only put in 20% effort, you can achieve 80% of the results. This isn't necessarily the case, of course. The 20% and the 80% numbers don't refer to the amount of effort you're putting in, but the causes and the consequences that you're working on. So the goal is not to reduce, essentially, or minimize the amount of effort that you're putting in, but to focus on the effort on a specific portion of well-being that's going to give you the biggest impact, the biggest bang for your buck. Of course, you still have to put in 100% effort into that 20% of your focus to achieve those 80% of those results. Does that make sense? Give me a high five if that makes sense. If not, we can catch it on the recording. Just review that again. I hope that made sense. So it's not about reducing the amount of effort to give you the 80% results. It's about focusing 100% of your effort on those key, most important behaviors that are going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. Okay, so let's have a little reflection around motivation. So what words, when I say motivation to you, what words jump into your brain? What is motivation to you? Share with me the first few words that jump into your brain if I was to say, what is motivation? Share with me in the chat function. Energy, yeah, inspire, driven, feeling inspired, energized. Love this. being able to get on with things. And it's really interesting, isn't it? That push, yeah, positivity, action, movement, that motive, the reason to do something, mental attitude. Yeah, really, really interesting reflections. Keep them coming, keep them coming. It's interesting, isn't it? Because motivation, it's not tangible. It's not something that I can pull out my back pocket and say, there you go, here, have one of them, and you're going to be motivated. We could say it's a state or a feeling. It often describes a desire or a want or a need, I guess. And it serves, as you said in the chat function, it serves to direct and energize our behavior, which is really, really important. And it comes in waves, doesn't it? As you can see by the graphic up on your screen. There are certain... I think we can all connect with this. Are there days, give me a high five, are there days when you are motivated, you are on it, whatever's happening, you're on it, give me a high five. And are there days when you're like, oh, this isn't for me today? The days you might turn up at the gym and you're like, bring it on, I'm really up for this. Well, there are days you might turn up for the gym and you're like, right, I'm out of here, nothing's working for me. And it's really important, isn't it? Because we might watch an inspirational video or listen to a podcast and we're bursting motivation and we feel like we can achieve all those things that we set ourselves out to achieve. But often we don't kind of take into account those life storms that kind of blow in on a day-to-day basis. And that's a bit of a problem. It's a bit of a challenge, isn't it? It feels like sometimes we're riding that wave of inspiration. We're riding that wave of motivation. And, it's going to last forever. And at that point, we do set ourselves these goals, these incredible tasks, these incredible goals. When we're flying high and we're up for it, I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to run a marathon. I'm going to learn a new skill. I'm going to make changes in my body composition. But that's when our motivation is on it. We're riding that wave, right? We genuinely believe we can achieve these things. And the problem is that, some days we just wake up, don't we? And we're just like, oh, there's no waves for me to ride today. I'm just not feeling on it. And our motivation is low. And the problem here is that often when our motivation is low like that, we're not necessarily kind to ourselves, are we? We don't take into account those life storms and we lose that drive or want or need to go and do stuff. And perhaps sometimes we beat ourselves up a little bit. We say to ourselves, why did I set myself that ridiculous habit that I wanted to try and make or break, And then we feel like we're a bit of a failure. We get into that kind of spiral of guilt and shame, and perhaps we begin to beat ourselves up a little bit more. We're not as compassionate as we could be. BJ Fogg, author of Tiny Habits, suggested that both motivation and willpower are shapeshifters by nature, which makes them unreliable. So sometimes it's really important to reflect and say, sometimes we don't acknowledge or recognize that motivation does come in waves, and we need to work perhaps with that natural cycle of motivation that we experience and resist beating ourselves up, for failing when life naturally gets in the way. So simplifying your habits to make them accessible is really, really imperative. Up on the screen here, up on the graphic, the main focus is to break the habit into smaller habits, which can allow you to make small but manageable changes in your everyday life. Now, if we can focus on the habits that you've identified that you want to make, reflect around them, make them even more accessible. So even on the days when you're less motivated or motivation is a challenge, we can still access that behavior. We can still access that little habit, that little behavior change. And we're going to talk a little bit more about reflection and simplification in a moment. Okay. Did that click? There we go. Fabulous. So we spoke about motivation. Let's talk very briefly then around willpower. So what is willpower? What jumps into your brain straight away? What words jump into your brain when you start to think about willpower? What is willpower? Someone saying focus straight away. And again, when it comes to willpower, people use different definitions to describe willpower, use different words or synonyms. Sometimes, like determination, someone's just put up here. Thank you, Liz. Yeah, determination, self-discipline, self-control. Yeah, some people a bit self-regulation jumps in as well. But at the core of willpower is that ability to, I guess, resist those short-term temptations and desires in order really to achieve those long-term kind of satisfaction, right? It's the choices you make for your long-term gains over those instant things, those instant gratification, I guess. But again, just reflecting around, the importance of self-compassion is one of the really, really key ingredients to sustaining behavior change. Much of the research reveals that sometimes, when we fall off that wagon, which we inevitably will do, right, at some point, put your hands up if you've at some point relapsed or had a setback from a task that you set yourself. Give me a high five. It happens, right? We do have and we do experience setbacks and relapses. It's part of the process. So it's really important that we start to reflect around that, and showing ourselves compassion is more helpful than beating ourselves up about it. So, for example, sometimes, and give me a high five if this resonates with you, perhaps you found yourself, instead of having just one unintended glass of wine at night, you might end up binge drinking and having the whole bottle. Does that resonate with some of us? Perhaps you might have that one unintended biscuit or Malteser and end up having the whole packet. Does that resonate with some of us? And whereas if we bring a little bit more self-compassion and kindness to the situation, we're much more likely to say, you know what, yeah, I had a bad day. I had a glass of wine that I wasn't planning on doing, but I know I can stop that, and tomorrow's another day I can reflect around that. So we have to understand that changing behavior is actually quite hard, and setbacks and relapses are definitely part of the process. It's part of the learning process. So again, just a quick reflection, around willpower and some of the misconceptions around willpower that people have. That people sometimes think that, whenever they think about people that have got really good, strong, solid habits, that they must have amazing, kind of incredible willpower to be able to do these things and sustain these behaviors. But actually, that's just not what happens. It looks like willpower, right? But it's actually self-habituated. These people create their environment to give them no alternative but to be successful. So rather than looking perhaps for that hidden willpower, that kind of hidden fuel tank of willpower that's in our heads that doesn't really exist, perhaps we should sometimes reflect and accept that we're actually quite fragile, aren't we? We're imperfect humans, and perhaps we can learn a lot by just giving ourselves and cutting ourselves a little bit of slack. And again, I just want to connect with your why. And this is incredibly powerful to resonate with us and to really kind of drive that insight about the importance of connecting with our why. Now, a trap that people can fall into sometimes is that setting goals, they sometimes set goals that don't really fit with them. So they aren't necessarily personally relevant to themselves. Has anyone set themselves a goal at the start of the year, like a New Year's resolution, because they felt like they should do it? Good goals are going to be those goals really that express your personal interests, your values. So it's very hard, of course, for someone else like me to tell you what your goal is going to be. People are generally better persuaded by the reasons that they have discovered for themselves rather than the ideas that have been expressed by others. So it can be really, really helpful to identify the reasons why you want to achieve this goal or this habit change that you've identified. So let me ask you, and again, this is a powerful question, I think. I find that this really drives a lot of introspection. So let me ask you, why do you care about making or breaking this habit that you've identified? Why do you care about it? Share with me your reflections in that chat function. Lovely reflections. So we get a reduction in stress. It's better for my family. It's better for my health. To break our need. A healthier version of me. I love that. Less suffering. Wonderful reflections. Do you know what? I just want to be healthier. That's why I care about making this goal. That's why I care about breaking this habit. And again, it's really important we get to that reason, that underlying inner reason. Why is it important? Because that's going to blow wind into your sails of behavior change, isn't it? That's going to help refill your motivation. It's going to help drive you if we really care about it, if it's important enough to us. And that's a really important factor in motivation, if it's important enough. Importance and confidence. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this habit that you want to make or break? 10 being extremely important. And in terms of confidence, how confident do you feel that you can go and make this change and sustain this change on a scale of 1 to 10? And if we get a kind of, a disproportionate numbers or altered numbers, then it might tell us, what we need to focus on. If we identify that actually, it's not that important to us, but I'm really confident, if it's not that important to you, why is it a goal for you? And if we identify it's really important to me, but my confidence is slightly lower, then it tells us, okay, well, what do we need to do to develop confidence? What do we need to do to put in place some sort of strategy to build a little bit more confidence so that we can just move from 5 to 5.5 or 6 to 6.5? What can we do just to improve your confidence? Nice reflections. Good stuff. Okay, so I want to introduce you to kind of the habit cycles now, and it's a pretty predictable formula, and we're going to understand this. This essentially is the backbone of every habit. Oh, excuse me. And as you can see up on your screen, we've got your trigger, your action, and your reward, and these are the 3 parts to every single habit. And as we said, this particular pattern is the backbone of every single habit. So let's start with the trigger. The trigger it cues the brain into to really initiate the behavior. So a trigger is something that gives you a little nudge towards in the direction really of your habit. It gives you a little push in the direction of your habit. So for example, if you've got a habit of drinking too much coffee and you realize in mid-morning you usually reach for that cup of coffee. Usually there's a trigger in place. So it might be the fact that someone shouts across the office, or you smell some coffee being made, that might become a trigger, and it might trigger and direct and push us into the action. Now, the next part of the formula here is the action. The action is the actual habit or behavior that we perform. So in this example, coffee, it would be actually drinking the coffee, right? It's really, really important to recognize that it's the action that really delivers the final part of this formula, which is the reward. And the reward is the end goal of every habit. Now, it's really, really important that we reflect and go, okay, we behave the way we behave to satisfy some sort of need. And in this scenario of having a mid-morning coffee, perhaps the need or the reward is that I want to feel a little bit more energized, or I want to feel less fatigued. So do you know what? I'm gonna have my coffee. So we start to see this kind of loop. And when it comes down to habits, as we said, the more self-aware we are, the more tuned we are into what the rewards you're craving, the easier it's going to be to understand why that habit actually is ingrained into your day. So let's talk a little bit about the habits. And we spoke about this very briefly. Your environment precedes your success. People that are more familiar with some of their triggers and this kind of habit cycle actually set up their environment to give them no alternative but to be successful. But they're more familiar with some of these triggers. Let me share with you some of these triggers that might resonate with you. Perhaps it's time of the day. I mean, do you have habits that are triggered by certain times of the day? Perhaps you might reach for a snack at a certain time of day. Perhaps you might go for a walk at a certain time of day. Perhaps you might take yourself off to bed at a certain time of the day. Another trigger, of course, is places and locations, that environment. It's very, very powerful, isn't it? So do you have some habits that are triggered by your physical environment? Our homes, our workplaces, our cars, our workstation, they're all littered, aren't they? They're all littered with triggers. So, for example, I'm delivering this webinar today with a sit-to-stand desk. Now, if I didn't have a sit-to-stand desk, the trigger wouldn't be there for me to stand up. So all of these triggers again, are important to reflect around and to notice. Another one is preceding events. So do you have some habits that are triggered by a notification or another habit? So for example, your phone buzzes and you pick it up and you start screen scrolling, or you put on a movie and instantly you feel the urge for I said Maltesers again, didn't I? Or instantly you feel the urge for popcorn when you put a film on. So when we're aware of these preceding events, we can be used to our advantage, of course, can't it? So we can start to stack habits. So for example, preceding event could be getting out of bed. This could be a trigger for you then to go and put the kettle on. Well, the kettle's boiling. It could be a trigger for you to put the radio on and have a bit of a boogie, etc., etc. Perhaps that's your morning routine. But let me share with you another trigger, which is, of course, our emotions. Again, do you have habits that are triggered by an emotion? Perhaps things like shopping, where or when you're shopping, when you feel bored, or eating when you feel stressed. Give me a high five. Does this resonate with anyone? Absolutely. And this one's hard. Actually, this one's a little bit harder to reprogram when it comes to reprogramming our habits. It's not impossible, but we need to pause and really pay attention, concentrate. The trick here when it comes to an emotion is really try not to label those emotions as good or bad. It's a great way to look at emotions. Are they either appropriate or inappropriate to the situation? But they're not good or bad. So we start to reflect around that and practice, articulating to yourself, how are you really feeling here, rather than distracting yourself by, engaging in that undesirable habit. And finally, this last one here is other people. Do you have some habits that are triggered by other people? Studies have been done on smoking habits, on alcohol habits, on success habits, and they all show that our circle of influence, the people that we spend our time with, influence our behavior. We are the people that we spend our time with. I think that was it. Jim Rohn's famous quote was, "You're the average." I think he said, "You're the average of 5 people you spend the most time with." Actually, it's quite accurate, right? It's quite accurate. We become the people we spend our time with. So let's bring this to life just a little bit more, so we can make it very specific to you. Let's look at the triggers again, and let's take some examples here. Now, the trigger can be sometimes a really easy win. Now, remember, the trigger cues the brain to initiate that behavior. It gives us that nudge. It pushes us in the direction of our habit, doesn't it? So what's your desired habit? Let's take a desired habit first. So if you've identified that you want to make a new habit, just where I've written on the screen here, move more, just substitute that for your habit that you want to, your desired habit that you want to start. Now, the key thing here, and one of the key things, and feel free to write this down, is to make a habit work and to give you more chance of making it work, we need to add positive triggers that will make it easier for us to access this desirable habit that we want. So let's take this desired habit of move more. Share with me in the chat function, how can we make someone's desired habit of just moving a little bit more in their day, how can we make it easier for them to access that behavior? Share with me your thoughts. What suggestions do you have? I want to move more. How can I make it easier for me to access that desirable habit that I want to move more? Wonderful. Yeah, sit less, schedule, diarize it, have your gym clothes ready the night before. Wonderful. Do you know what someone said to me once was they said that after they got a workout buddy, and that's a great one, right? So you get a workout buddy. But he said what they used to do is at the end of their workout, they used to go for walks 2-3 times a week. They used to swap trainers. So I take your trainers, you take my trainers. The reason being, of course, that they both had to. It drove that obligation. It drove that obligation for them to do it. Take the stairs, get off. Yeah, nice one, Brill. So set movement timers, you've come up with them, great. Take up a team sport, yeah, things that are going to be relevant for you, right? And again, we're not telling this person how to do it. It's important the person reflects around their own life. You're the expert on your life, by the way, not me. You are the expert on your life, so you know what's going to work best. And do you have the abilities to deliver that? So what about then, let's look at perhaps breaking a habit. And again, the key thing to reflect around when we want to break a habit, to put us in the best position to break that habit, is that we need to remove those triggers to stop or even prevent us from accessing that behavior. So it needs to be less accessible for us. So if you've identified a habit that you want to break, how can we make, let's use in this example, excessive screen time, how can we make it less accessible for me to do that habit? What suggestions do you have? How can I make it more difficult for myself to spend time on screen time? Yeah, I love that. Someone's just saying be a little bit more self-compassionate, you know, self-kindness. Switch off the phone at set time, reduce your mobile data, put your phone out of reach. Really great stuff. So I'll put up a few here again. Set alarms, screen time allowance. Do more of your positive habits. I love that. If you're doing more of your positive habits by default, I guess you're doing less of your less helpful habits. I love that. Andrew's just said, mute everything. Good stuff. There we go. Fabulous. Oh, let's pop in another one. And turn off those notifications. Leave your device out of sight, out of reach. And there's many more. These are not kind of prescriptive. You know, there's many more out there. Lock your phone away. Yeah, great. You know, it could whatever makes it more difficult for you to access that behavior. Good. So another part of the habit cycle was the reward. And again, this is really, really important to reflect around, you know, what reward might you be seeking? You know, this isn't always obvious actually at first glance, you know. So it's actually really good to reflect and stay curious around this when it comes to your habits. So think of some of the habits that you're employing at the moment. When you perform that action, you're doing it for a reason. Remember, people do the things they do to satisfy a need. What is that need? What is that reward that you're seeking? So think for a moment, what reward are you seeking by engaging in the habit that you're engaging in at the moment? Are you seeking to feel more self-confident, more connected with others, or you're more connected with yourself? Are you seeking a sense of calm, or to feel more relaxed, more energy? I guess it's really important, isn't it, that we reflect on, you know, rewards essentially are linked to those cravings. And when those cravings happen, because the brain, it kind of anticipates, doesn't it? It anticipates the reward before that habit has actually even started yet. So most people know that we can generate energy through eating more vegetables or prioritizing our sleep or exercising, but a more immediate energy reward might come from that cup of coffee that we mentioned. It might come from that kind of sugar hit or reaching for that, you know, quick fix in terms of sugar. So this is where that mindset comes in, because that neuroplasticity, there are a wonderful ability of our brain to mold and to change and evolve. We can actually retrain that brain. So rewards are literally our brains, you know, is where our brains identify which actions essentially are worth remembering, which is why it's so important to internally celebrate those small wins, isn't it? It's incredibly important to reflect around that. You know, when do we celebrate those small wins? So anything in life, you know, worth doing is almost inconvenient, isn't it? You know, we start to think about the reward that we're seeking generally, and it fits around either, you know, feeling good, we get a hit of serotonin, or we kind of feel a little bit more energy. But we can look at those degenerative kind of quick fixes, those short-term gains that give us a quick fix and it satisfies our need in the moment, but actually in the long term, it's less helpful. Or we can focus more on those sustainable kind of habits and really start to reflect around, you know, I know it's inconvenient at this time, but if I just keep on and maintain that consistent practice over time, it's going to give me these wonderful, wonderful kind of benefits and progress. So reflecting around the reward becomes incredibly important for us. What rewards are you seeking? I'm conscious of time, so we're gonna just focus just on the action now, to really identify, you know, that we had the trigger, we had the reward, and now we're going to focus on that action. So the more successful you feel, the more sustainable your habit's going to become. So we look at this as the 3 S's. The more we can simplify our behavior, the more likely we are to be successful at that behavior, because it's more simple. Even on those days when our motivation is dropping or our willpower is waning, we can still access it and feel more success because we've accessed it. And that leads to the sustainability of the exercise. So what's your desired habit? So think of your desired habit now that you all highlighted. Just write down your desired habit, and then next to that, draw an arrow backwards and say, okay, well, how can I simplify this habit to make it more accessible for me? How can I do that again to make it more accessible to me? So we simplify it down to the point where we go, okay, this habit is so easy. It's this one small action that will really allow us to gain that traction and momentum that we need to drive that routine. And a great question, someone's just popped in. How long does it take before it becomes normal or a routine? It depends on a lots of factors, and ability is one of them. For example, if I said, you know, create a routine of having a glass of water every morning before you do anything else, our ability generally is okay with that. We can probably do that. But if I said to you, you know, create a habit of exercising 3 times a week, how long is it going to take before that becomes an automatic, unconscious, competent kind of activity for us? And that might take a lot longer. In fact, I think the research suggests it might take only 14 days to create a habit of drinking more water, and it might take up to a year for some people to create a habit of exercising 3 times a week or more. So great question. How long does it take before it becomes normal? It depends on the person. It depends on how consistent you are with that behavior, but great question. So think about simplifying the action as much as you can to give you the best opportunity, again, to engage with the exercise. And if I said to you, you know, imagine on a scale of 1 to confidence scale and a 1 to 10, how confident do you feel of doing 30 full body weight press-ups every day for the next 30 days? Give me a number on the confidence scale. How confident do you feel you can do that? 10 is very confident, 1 is not very confident. Okay, and using that same confidence scale, how confident do you feel that whilst the kettle's boiling, you can put your hands on the desktop or the table or the counter and do 5 countertop push-ups? How confident do you feel you could do that? Give me a number. Much more confident, right? So we can look at the action and reduce it and simplify it as best we can. Really conscious of time. Apologies, we've overrun just a little. Hopefully you can hang around. If you do need to hop off, what I am going to do is just launch the feedback poll. So feel free to jump off the call if you need to. Before you do, just complete that feedback poll. That would be wonderful if you could do that. I'm just going to finish up here with just 2 more slides. And this one here is around the action and what we can do to upgrade the action. So remember that changing behavior is really quite hard. So another way to invest in your future self is to upgrade an existing action. So you may have, for example, have an ingrained habit already of drinking that mid-morning coffee to get the reward of that energy. But what could you do differently to upgrade that action so you get the same reward? So you might go out for a 5-minute walk. You might do some deep breathwork exercises to energize us. And it's more helpful and it's more healthy. What if you had an ingrained habit of kind of drinking a glass of wine every night, and you might be seeking a reward of feeling a sense of calm and relaxation. That's why you're drinking the wine. But what can you do to upgrade that action to give you the same reward? So part of the action, again, we could reflect on those habits that we currently have and currently engage in. Just look at the action and go, okay, well, what can I do to upgrade that action if I had to, or if I want to? And again, a really important question, one that I suggest you write down and reflect around for the rest of the day is, if you wanted to engage in and upgrade your new habit tomorrow, what do you need to do today? So if I wanted to upgrade my coffee habit and drink, instead of coffee, I've still got that habit of wanting a coffee, perhaps I could upgrade to decaf. What do I need to do today? I'll probably need to go and get some decaf. So we need to reflect around the resources that we might need in order to promote that habit upgrade. Yes, I do believe you will. Someone's just, Peter's just popped in the chat function. They've missed the beginning of the session. We will receive a recording link sent out to registered participants. Perhaps, Tash, you can answer that a little bit more accurately than I can, or will it just be accessed, this webinar just be accessed on our Wellbeing People communities? I'm not certain. I'd imagine it will be sent out for you, but I can't be sure. Perhaps Tash can give us an insight. Okay, I'm really conscious of time. I said 45 minutes, but thank you so much for still being here. And we're just going to finish with a little recap here. As we said, self-compassion is much more important than self-discipline. Oh, thank you, Tash. So Tash, our commercial director, said, yes, you will be able to find the full recording in our wellbeing communities and social media platforms. So thank you, Tash, for that. Quick recap. Self-compassion is more important than self-discipline. Setbacks, relapses are part of the process. How can you become a little bit more compassionate? Some key activities: practice mindfulness. When we're caught up in that self-criticism or that kind of negative rumination, developing that state of non-judgmental concentration and practice can be a really wonderful antidote, of course. Giving ourselves permission to be imperfect. Giving ourselves permission to be imperfect. And treat yourself as you would treat your best friend. Treat yourself as you would treat your best friend. Reflect, simplify, upgrade, celebrate as best you can. Remember, we're programmed to notice the bad things, and sometimes we innocently skip over and don't even notice our achievements or our small wins. At every moment you have, don't be afraid. Be more courageous and celebrate and pause and celebrate, your wins, your personal wins. However small and insignificant you think they are, celebrate them. We spoke about habit cycles and embracing inconvenience to be and to drive and be the best version of yourself that you deserve to be. I'm actually pretty impressed that I managed to squeeze that into 50 minutes. So apologies that we have overrun just a little. As always, at the end of any kind of webinar or workshop or session, coaching session, either a one-to-one or a small group or a large group coaching sessions, we encourage session reflection to really drive home that learning. So what was most useful for you from this session? What did you take away from today? Please share with us in the chat function there, the comments. And again, we absolutely invite you all to come join with us in our Wellbeing People communities, both in LinkedIn and on Facebook, where there's lots more resources. There's other wellbeing health and fitness experts and professionals that come and share their wonderful insights in there. There's also loads of different information and 1% progress experiments for you to engage in as well. So it just really remains for me to say thank you so much for attending this complimentary, this free session delivered by Wellbeing People and myself, Grant, today. It's been really, really wonderful, actually, reading your wonderful reflections. So I'd just like to acknowledge you and say thank you so much for sharing those insights. You didn't have to, but you chose to. So thank you so much for doing that. Please feel free to, again, discover more about what Wellbeing People can offer. Come join us on our Wellbeing communities in LinkedIn and Facebook, or at wellbeingpeople.com to discover a little bit more about that. But thank you so much, everybody. Hopefully you can go away and engage in some of these habits, and more importantly, reflect around them first. Pause. You know, if you want to start tomorrow, what do you need to do today? So get stuck into it. Have a great day. Have a great week. And I look forward to perhaps seeing you again soon. Thanks, everybody. Don't forget to jump on the feedback poll before you leave.